The mansion lights glowed across the city skyline like a silent crown of wealth, but inside those walls, a storm was raging. At the center of it stood a young girl, trembling hands clutching yet another failed test. Her name was Isabella, the only daughter of a billionaire empire builder who believed in perfection above all else. She had the money, the private tutors, the best schools money could buy. But what she didn't have was the one thing every child quietly longs for: belief. And without it, no matter how hard she tried, she always seemed to stumble, always falling short. That night, as she stood in the hallway of her father's towering corporate building, her tear-streaked face hidden in shame, she thought the world would never see her as anything but a failure. What she didn't know was that someone watching from the shadows, someone nobody would ever expect, would change her life forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of simple hearts to change lives, then please take a moment to like this video, comment, share it with a friend, and subscribe to our channel Kindness Corner. Stories like these remind us that greatness doesn't always come from wealth or titles. Sometimes it comes from the most humble souls who dare to care. Isabella's story began with silence. Silence in the grand dining hall, where her father sat at the far end of a golden table, rarely looking up from his phone to meet her eyes. Silence in the car rides to her private academy, where chauffeurs in black suits replaced warm hugs and words of encouragement. And silence in her own mind as she sat through endless hours of tutoring, her notebooks filled with red marks and corrections, each failure weighing heavier than the last. She wasn't stupid, she was just drowning. Drowning in pressure, in expectations, in the crushing belief that no matter what she did, she would never be enough. Her father's empire was built on victories, and failure had no place in his world. And yet, failure seemed to be all that followed Isabella. One winter evening, after yet another meeting with her school principal, her father stormed out of the building with anger in his eyes, leaving Isabella behind with the staff to think about what she had done. It was then, in the stillness of the hallway, that she sank to the cold marble floor, her test paper crumpled in her small hands, tears streaming freely. She felt invisible, forgotten, and broken. That's when she heard the sound of a broom sweeping against the floor. A man in a navy uniform, sleeves rolled up, quietly approached. He was a janitor, carrying nothing but his tools, and the weary look of someone who had faced life's battles without fanfare. His name was Michael, a single father working 2 jobs to raise his little boy. He wasn't rich, wasn't powerful, wasn't anyone the world would stop to notice. But he noticed her. At first, Isabella tried to hide the paper, but the bright red F was hard to miss. She expected judgment, maybe even laughter. After all, she was the billionaire's daughter who had everything. But instead, Michael simply knelt down beside her, his voice gentle, his presence steady, like an anchor against the storm. He didn't see a failure. He saw a child who was trying, a child who just needed someone to believe in her. And in that moment, something remarkable happened. For the first time in her life, Isabella felt seen. The days that followed were quiet but transformative. Isabella began lingering after her tutoring sessions, sometimes just to avoid going home, sometimes hoping she might catch sight of the janitor again. And Michael, always busy with his mop, broom, or polishing cloth, always had a kind word for her. He never lectured, never scolded. Instead, he taught her something she had never been taught before: patience. It's not about how fast you solve the problem, he once said as he showed her how to carefully remove a stubborn stain on the floor. It's about not giving up until it's clean. Mistakes don't mean failure, they mean you're learning. To Isabella, those words were like water to a parched soul. For the first time, she realized that failure wasn't the end. It was part of the journey. Slowly, she began to ask Michael for advice, sometimes about her studies, sometimes about life. He would sit with her during his short breaks, teaching her little tricks. He used to teach his own son math, showing her how to break big problems into smaller ones, and reminding her to breathe. to slow down, to believe that she could do it. It wasn't about formulas and textbooks anymore. It was about trust, resilience, and the secret he carried with him through every hardship. Never mistake a stumble for the end of the road. Weeks turned into months, and something extraordinary began to happen. Isabella's test scores, once covered in red marks, began to improve. At first, it was just a small rise, a failing grade climbing to a barely passing one. But each improvement, no matter how small, was celebrated like a victory. She carried that secret Michael had given her, the courage to keep trying, and slowly, steadily, it reshaped her world. Her teachers noticed her focus. Her classmates noticed her confidence. And even her father, distant and demanding, began to notice a light in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. But the journey was not without storms. There were days Isabella slipped back into doubt, days when another red mark felt like a crushing defeat. On those days, she would find Michael sweeping the same endless hallways, and he would remind her again, in his quiet, steady way, that no test score could ever define her worth. "The world will try to measure you," he said once as he wrung out his mop. "But the only measure that matters is how much heart you put into the fight." Those words carved themselves deep into Isabella's soul, carrying her through the hardest nights. The real test came not in a classroom, but in her father's world. One evening, during a dinner filled with powerful business associates, Isabella was asked a question in front of everyone. Her father's eyes were sharp with expectation, waiting for her to falter. But instead of shrinking back, she lifted her chin, remembered Michael's voice, and answered with clarity and courage. She didn't just give the right answer. She gave it with confidence, the kind that can only be born from struggle. For the first time, her father's stern expression softened, his pride flickering through the cracks of his usual cold demeanor. What Isabella didn't know was that her father, curious about her sudden change, had discovered the truth. He had seen her with Michael, had watched from a distance as the janitor patiently guided his daughter. At first, he was furious, ashamed even, that his daughter would turn to a janitor instead of the tutors he paid fortunes for. But then he saw something he had never given her himself: belief. And in that moment, he realized that wealth could buy everything except the one thing his daughter had truly needed: kindness. In time, Isabella's life transformed completely. She didn't just pass her exams, she thrived in them. But more importantly, she carried with her a strength no grade could measure. She learned to see her stumbles not as failures, but as stepping stones. And she never forgot the secret that had saved her, that one steady belief, spoken by a man who had nothing to give, but everything that mattered, could change a life forever. If this story has touched your heart, please show your love by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribing to Kindness Corner. Your support helps us keep telling stories that remind the world of the power of kindness, hope, and second chances. And before we end, we'd love to hear from you. Would you have believed in Isabella if you saw her failing? Or would you have walked away like everyone else? Please share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might inspire someone who needs it today. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons don't come from books or titles. They come from the quiet heroes sweeping hallways, carrying secrets that can change lives forever.